Trick Williams has crossed the line, turned up at TNA Rebellion to attack the TNA World Champion. Say his name, he will appear. Joe Hendry. Oh, what happens here? From now, we'll talk about it. This is WrstlXtra. Yo. This is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, joined by my trios team, the real House of Black, the only House of Black that is still standing. Next, the WrestleManiac, if you will, yeet. And of course, the other man, say his name, he will appear. The professor that is Gerard Bonner. Let's get straight into it. Trick Williams made an appearance on Sunday's TNA Rebellion, PLE, minutes after Joe Hendry defended his championship against Kazarian and Ethan Page in a triple threat match. Of course, Trick was responding and getting his revenge, so to speak, on Joe Hendry, who appeared on last week's NXT and called Trick Williams a whiny B. Yeah. Gerard, I'm going to go to you first. I think it's now obvious and official that we have heel Trick Williams. How do you feel about this? Have they done it in the right way? We kind of saw, obviously Trick crashing out over the last few months and being upset about not getting his chance and people getting involved when he wants to go for Obafemi and all the rest of it. Is this what we wait to see?
Yeah, I think this is very necessary for Trick. He spent the last year or so as the top face in NXT. And in the process, as the champion, as the representative of the brand, we saw that as good as the entrance was, there was some other things about the championship reign and his run that weren't quite clicking. And so people tend to forget that when Trick Williams first showed up, he showed up as a heel. He was the sidekick, of course. I'm probably sure he wouldn't like the term sidekick. He was the tag team partner, let's say that, of Carmelo Hayes. And he started coming into his own. And as he did, people started enjoying him. I like the gradual heel turn. It is one of those things where it's not abrupt. It's not where we go, why did that happen? It makes sense. He's gradually done it. He's gotten frustrated, and it makes sense. Now, you solidify that by attacking arguably the most popular guy, certainly in TNA, and certainly the viral sensation that is Joe Hendry. So, yeah, we've got an official Trick heel turn, and I think it's a great thing. And to do it in TNA, I think, is even better, because what it does is it solidifies the importance of this NXT TNA partnership. People were talking before about you only have certain tiers of NXT stars showing up. But now you've got the former NXT champion and the guy who has defined the brand for the last year and a half, 2 years. So I think we've made a statement here with this heel turn for Trick.
For sure. Going back to last week's NXT, Joe Hendry came out, and the reason for him to come out, or his main reason, was to confront the NXT champion Obafemi. Obviously, that happened. Both men holding up titles in front of each other. It's clear that the challenge and something's going to happen down the line. But now Trick's inserted himself into this. Mex, what do you think the timeline is going to be now for these three guys? Do we get a triple threat match with both titles involved, or one of them, whatever, or do we get two separate matches, in some way between the three?
I think the smart thing to do is two separate matches between the three men. These matches where you put two belts on the line and then like the first finish is for this title and the second finish is that title. If they did that and it would be like Joe Hendry wins the first fall and Obafemi wins the second fall, then everyone just leaves with what they came with. So, it's not much excitement or intrigue sort of thing. And the only person that can really gain from the situation is Trick. So, I think there's more longevity if you do Trick Williams versus Joe Hendry, which would be good. And then kind of get him out of Joe Hendry's way, assuming Joe Hendry gets the win. and then Joe Hendry can then move on to Obafemi and challenge for the NXT title. But this is a nice little excursion for Trick Williams. You know, I think we all know in some aspects he's ready for the main roster. In others, yeah, he still needs some development. So this is kind of, you know, that place where he can go and get a bit more development, maybe beat one or two TNA names before eventually facing Joe Hendry, and bide his time basically, and probably in a bit of a you know, like a landing pattern before an airplane lands. So just some other kind of side missions for him to kind of do before the draft later on this year.
You know, I've seen it discussed already on another podcast. I believe it was Ring of Wrestling, who talked about, you know, the possibility of Trick or anyone else from NXT kind of having, you know, a long time in TNA before going to the main roster. You know, we talked about this last week, you know, about, you know, Trick, Obafemi, Javon, all kind of being ready for, you know, in their own ways for the main roster. But then, you know, we've seen Penta, Phoenix, we've seen Aleister Black come back, we've seen Rusev, we've seen Bron Breakker kind of getting his chance. We want to see Finn Balor get his chance. Dominic Mysterio's, like, there are so many people who are getting chances and all the rest of it. And now to then throw a Trick Williams in and kind of, you know, not know exactly how he's going to fit in or what his story is going to be. Could a run in TNA for maybe, you know, a few months, and not just, you know, a match against Joe Hendry. Maybe he has matches against some other TNA stars, Moose and a few others. Could a, you know, like maybe a 3-4 month stint in TNA also be a way to kind of prepare him even further to then jump to the main roster?
I think so. I think he needs it, especially from an in-ring point of view, like we've mentioned before. Like, he needs exactly that. And especially where we've been having, us and the rest of the community been having this discussion around black talents going to the next level. I don't know if they will do it, but it would be amazing if Trick Williams could win the TNA title. And, you know, then we're bringing someone to the dance of the main roster that he's won the TNA title, been an NXT champion, and it's like, okay, from day one, day dot, he's already a big star now, you know. So it would be good for him. Keeping him there to, like, even if he wrestled with one of those figures now and stuff, but some of those kind of elder statesmen of the TNA roster, I think that's what he could probably do with more so than just kind of, you know, rigorously just going through some of the lower ranked names and getting there. Probably useful as well, but he needs to wrestle those main roster level guys if he's to come onto the main roster and hit the ground running.
You know, we've talked about this so many times when it comes to the NXT TNA partnership, you know, with the likes of Jordan Grace. The Meta Girls had their chance when Joe Hendry first showed up. You know, the X Division title being on NXT a couple of times. The whole thing of a title changing, so an NXT person holding a TNA title and vice versa. Gerard, is this now something we shouldn't actually expect? Because there's been so many chances it feels like it could have and should have happened. Mm-hmm. Could you see Trick Williams holding that TNA championship?
There's an obvious case for Trick Williams holding the TNA championship, and I think, you know, of all of the stars who crossed over, and there are a number, this one makes arguably the most sense. If for no other reason than I think TNA. See, here's the thing, and I don't know that we've ever talked about it. For this to work, it has to be mutually beneficial to both brands, right? So it's great for us as fans to go, holy cow, you know, Jordan Grace or Moose is the NXT champion, right? Like, it sounds great, but does it make sense for both brands? How do both brands win from it? I think Trick Williams would add something to the TNA roster that perhaps only Joe Hendry might have added to the NXT roster. Having others from TNA come over to NXT and win championships won't hit as hard. I think where it's beneficial is, much like Mech said, it gives Trick the opportunity to get some additional reps in front of a different audience, in front of tenured stars that would help him. To me, it reminds me of, and I know this was slightly different circumstances, but when Trinity went over to TNA and became a world champion there, her skills automatically improved. That, or we actually got to see them, depending upon your perspective, right?
True.
What it did ultimately was it made her far more confident. She had the opportunity to put an entire brand on her back. Now, Trick knows what that's like, but he knows what that's like with relatively developmental talent. And I say relatively in air quotes. In TNA, you're definitely dealing with talents that are tenured, from an Eric Young to Frankie Kazarian to Mike Santana to Steve Macklin. Like, there are Mustafa Ali. There are a lot of Moose. Like, there are names that are there that would really test Trick and test him at a championship level. I think would be a great moment for both TNA and for NXT, and would properly prepare Trick for that move. So I think Trick is the right one if we're going to do it. Granted, we've had a whole year of this tease, and we've been kind of let down. I mean, we thought Fraxium would be the ones, right? We thought the Hardys would be the ones. There are tons of folks that we thought would be the ones. I think Trick makes sense. With that said, I don't think we should measure the success of a Trick opportunity in TNA by whether or not he wins the TNA World Championship, because history has told us we could be disappointed. So this is going to be interesting to see. Personally, where I think it makes sense is if Trick wins the TNA Championship, then Joe Hendry fighting for the NXT title doesn't have that title for title kind of mix-up thing that could get even more complicated. I'd almost rather see Joe Hendry come over and become the NXT champion, especially after his WrestleMania moment, than to have one guy hold both titles.
Oh, for sure. I'm when I asked Mex the question about how does the timeline work, and between the three guys, for me, in an ideal world, and I really don't expect to see this happening, but in an ideal world, it would be good for Trick to beat Joe Hendry, take the TNA Championship, and then Joe Hendry to beat Obafemi, and win the NXT Championship. It fits right, as for the same reasons you just said, Gerard. Trick would be tested against some of the TNA guys. It's it gives him again more time to develop a little bit more before anything with the WWE main roster. Joe Hendry winning the NXT Championship would just be different level when it comes to social media and all that kind of thing. So that probably would be the best way to go. Personally, in terms of what we've seen in the past, I just see any kind of interaction with all of these guys. No titles are changing hands. We're just going to see some great matches, some great confrontations, all that kind of thing, just to raise the views and whatnot for both brands. And for anyone that is still kind of questioning this whole partnership, it's done wonders for TNA in terms of their viewing and their buy rates and their tickets and all that kind of thing. That alone I think is the only thing that was needed to measure any type of success when it comes to this partnership. And I think that's already been happening. Speaking of Rebellion, one thing I want to talk about real quickly, actually, we saw the Ultimate X match. Absolute madness. Ooh. But there is one thing that we're all talking about, and I think we need to talk about it here, and I want to get your opinions. That spot with oh my god, I've forgotten his name.
Leon Slater.
Leon Slater, for goodness sake. The spot with Leon Slater doing the Swanton 450 off the top of the Ultimate X onto a bunch of guys. There's about 6 of them. Somehow, Leon Slater lands flat on his face for the most part. luckily, Leon Slater's come away and he's mentioned on social media that he was fine and he's still walking, live to tell another tale, all that good stuff. But what do you make of the spot itself and the criticism of the guys who were supposed to have caught him or cushioned his fall or that kind of thing? What are your thoughts on that spot and that whole situation, Mix?
What I'd say is that Leon Slater is an absolute class act. He belongs, more than belongs. The spot in that style of match belongs. It's what the Ultimate X match has become known for and the talents involved in it. So, I won't say, remove stuff like that from wrestling and how some, I guess, people have. Like, it's the home of it. As for the men down below that were to do the job of breaking his fall, let's call it, I think for the most part, just looking at the situation, everyone would have had the intention of doing that. You are trusting your dance partner. When someone is falling at velocity at you, I guess like your second nature would tell you move out the way, sort of thing, rather than do the catch. Now, I think you can see from it a lot of his body that did land was like, what's his name? Sydney caught took a lot of that fall. I saw AJ France's arm was out trying to do something. I don't want to point anything because I saw Matt Cardona step back.
Yep.
And felt, I mean, what is now interesting, which I guess what we're talking about is the discourse around it. A lot of the wrestlers have come out and said either, you don't know what the situation's like, so don't talk about it. Very sensitive, as we've pointed out, like I said last week. Just there's a lot of sensitivity around wrestling and opinions on wrestling these days. The most important thing for me, Leon is fine. He's got up, said he's cool, and I just think that, of course, if we are letting Leon go up there, we at the bottom as well, there's no spot if the guys down there don't do their job. So everyone's got to just be a bit more careful. On this occasion, I would just say we've got away with one, and the boys fine, and things continue. But yeah, I think now people are kind of save their face by saying, "Oh, well, I tried to do this, I tried to do that. You don't know what it's like," and this is where it's like, "Oh, did you help? Were you there or were you not?" So yeah.
Gerard, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
It's very interesting. I mean, I don't know how often they get a chance to rehearse something like that from that height, right? Like you're used to the top rope kind of thing, the top rope to the floor. That's usually the distance that people deal with. The higher you go, the trickier it gets. And even though there were 6 guys, it's a tricky space. And again, I think sometimes what can happen in this space is we can get into the what ifs a lot. What if somebody moved? What if this? What if that? We have enough moments that have happened that aren't what ifs. Like for instance, I think about the Big E spot that happened several years ago, right? Something that should have been fairly easy. Now we're dealing with what happened. So what we have to look at is, okay, he's okay, right? He was the first man to get up from this spot, he being Leon Slater. So that's the win. I'm glad that he is okay. To me, I don't think enough people are talking about what I felt like was equally, if not more egregious, which was him then going up, getting the belt, landing with the belt. The rules are the first person with both feet on the canvas with the belt wins the match. He has the belt, then he gets speared, and the belt's taken from him, and automatically the referee's decision's final. Guys, that to me is where we should be having an uproar, because really Leon Slater, especially after that move and coming down with it, should be the X Division champion. And so and then of course they showed it on replay, which made it worse. So to me, I think now that we know he's safe, and we knew he was safe that day, That's what we should be hollering about, because Leon Slater should absolutely be the X Division champion.
Amazing. Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. That spot was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough that can be said about it. You can look at it in so many different ways, and someone moved out of the way, and they should have done this and they should have done that. But as you said, Gerard, they're dealing with a height and a velocity that was different, a timing, everything was different to what they're used to. So yeah, so many things could have gone through their head, but we can argue it to and fro whether it was right or wrong. But as Mick said, the main thing is that Leon Slater's fine. But yeah, Leon Slater as the X Division champion. We've seen him over the last few weeks, tangling with Moose and the system, getting into it and, partnering with, the legends that are the Hardy Boys. Even has, a twist of slate added to his move set as well. All of these things. And, they're clearly preparing him to be great. And, we should see, as I've said this before, when they first kind of mentioned this whole partnership with TNA NXT, that for me, the dream match that I want to see, probably more than any other that I've thought about or mentioned or we've probably already seen, is Leon Slater versus Javon Evans. Because their careers, especially over the last 2 years, have been, almost exactly the same. In terms of their ages, their abilities, the way they've been thrusted, skyrocketed to the top and handled the pressure as well, and all of those things. That match for me is top of any type of dream cross the line crossover dream match for me, definitely. So it'd be amazing to see.
Happy birthday, Javon Evans.
Oh, happy birthday, Javon Evans. Oh, yeah,
yes,
of course.
Sir.
He turns 21 today.
Sir. Yeah.
It's crazy. And he's been doing this thing for what, 6 years? 6 years has been... That's
crazy. It's nuts.
Mad. Yeah. And Leon Slater's what, 19?
Yeah, 19.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Unreal.
Incredible. Speaking of mishaps, injuries, things that can go wrong in the ring, we found out on Raw on Monday that on SmackDown, was it on SmackDown? Yeah, on SmackDown. Sorry, on Friday, that Bianca Belair has her hands, broken her fingers, her wrist, all sorts has happened, and she'll be out for an undisclosed amount of time. Going back to everything that we were saying last week about the whole Big Three situation, we saw Jade challenge Tiffany Stratton. Naomi eventually got involved in the match. So we can see that that's going to continue in some way. Do you think that with Bianca out for a time, it's kind of, probably put a spanner in the works in terms of what we probably thought the original plan or some sort of plan would be with these three ladies? Max.
After the segment on SmackDown and then the Naomi and Jade's segment when Naomi interrupted Jade's match, I was thinking if they're going to do this, they bring back Bianca like as a heel. Like whenever they have the next Naomi and Jade match, they bring Bianca back then, right in the midst of it. And ultimately she makes her choice then as to who she is siding with. If they're going to go the heel route, then obviously she'll help Naomi. Naomi gets her win back. If they go the other way, then yeah, they go the other way. But I think that's the spot now. She didn't win the title. She's off injured. You have to bring her back in the midst. And to be honest, it's a finger injury or whatever, couple fingers maybe, and hopefully she gets well soon. Those don't take too long. She will eventually start wrestling with two fingers bandaged together, even when they're not 100% healed, So she will be back fairly soon. Like maybe obviously Backlash, she's going to miss that. But if they do the Saturday night main event pay-per-view towards the end of May, she could be back by then if we're going to have like a Naomi Bianca match there. So yeah, I don't think this is going to be like her written off for ages and ages, but they have to kind of disclose it because she is someone that's on TV weekly. So yeah, I think they literally throw her into the thick of it when they are having the next round of the Jade and Naomi saga.
Gerard, what do you see with Jade and Naomi, obviously we saw Jade challenge Tiffany Stratton, a very good match between the two. There was also this thing that we saw with Netflix advertising the, what was it called again? The whole thing about WWE going to Mania and, you know, being in the writer's room and that all that behind the scenes stuff. Unreal, that's the one. And, you know, there's been big talk about the sheet in the back that had all the WrestleMania plans. One of them being Jade Cargill versus Nia Jax, for the women's championship. Are we getting back towards that? Because they were all involved in, you know, on SmackDown on Friday. Are we getting back towards that? Are we going to see a fatal four-way before all four women? What are we going towards here?
It's interesting. I thought it was interesting to see Jade Cargill and Tiffany Stratton Friday night. Like that was unexpected from where I sat. And I was like, oh, they're going for it now. Wow. It was a really big opportunity, I think, for both of them. Probably bigger for Jade, considering Tiffany's just off the heels of this Charlotte match. And we're getting to see what Jade can do one-on-one. I think in terms of what we could be looking towards, I think we actually could be looking for the one thing that we haven't mentioned here, which is finally the female presentation of the bloodline. There was an interesting exchange between Naomi and Nia Jax in that whole thing, where they caught each other's eye, and there was a quick acknowledgement, and Naomi stayed out there that entire time while Naomi was putting the boots to Tiffany Stratton. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, oh, this is interesting. Are we finally getting it? Because for Naomi, with the whole proceed with caution situation, it seems to make sense that she'd have some backup somewhere. And the backup in the form of family, Nia Jax, makes a lot of sense. And there's some things I think that they could accomplish together, particularly because, again, if you think about it, Jade has seemingly always gotten the best of Naomi, which it's kind of an unfair war if one person's always winning their encounters. You throw a Nia Jax in there, which is a cool callback to, you know, Jade's Royal Rumble debut. And now we got something that could be really interesting to cook, because I don't know that Jade by herself can overcome both Naomi and Nia Jax. So I think the thing that's in here isn't quite the fatal four-way, but is the uniting of the family members in perhaps some semblance or resemblance of a female bloodline with Nia Jax and Naomi.
Oh, do you think it will be presented in that, you know, bloodline space, or will that just be a thing of our imagination?
It'll be something we know. I don't think they'll use that name. I think they're trying to get away from all things bloodline. Yeah. You know, you've moved Paul Heyman out of the way. You've kind of got Solo doing one thing. You got Fatu doing another thing. So I think they're trying to get away from that. But I think the two of them working together is kind of like, you know, when you have the related family members who never call themselves family, but you know they are. It's going to be that kind of thing.
For sure. Next, do you feel as though Jade should be in this space of challenging for the World Championship, or do you think like, you know, probably it's too early, or maybe this was just an exhibition match more than it is a showing of what's going to happen in the near future?
If it's a fatal four-way like you talked about, it's fine. She's not challenging, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Like in the men's United States picture, like my jaw dropped when I saw Drew McIntyre walk out.
Right.
I said, he's not challenging. He's there. He's fine. He's another person in the match. If they go a fatal four-way route over there, he's not really challenging for it. So yeah, I think it's a good position to say, you know, she's got that experience under her belt. We've seen her in a singles capacity a couple of times now. She's getting more familiar with that. We've seen her do the tag team stuff. Let's see her in a capacity in a fatal four-way where it's like you go in, you do your spot, you roll out, you let someone else come in. You know, it's a different dynamic sort of thing. And she needs to get all of these different dynamics under her belt sort of thing. So I think it's a it's a really good position. I think a lot of people were sold after her WrestleMania performance. Of course, there are still critics and there's still more proving to do. We know that. She probably knows that as well. But yeah, for her to then just come out the gate straight away and challenge the champion, you know, good on you, sort of thing. Like it's a good place to be, sort of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock into her becoming champion just yet. But yeah, definitely she's in and around the right crowd.
For sure. Speaking of championships, we saw the World Tag Team Championships defended in a TLC match. The Street Profits managed to defend against the Motor City Machine Guns and DIY. And a phenomenal, non-stop, fast-paced match between all three teams. Amazing to see the Street Profits retain. The question is, should that have been at Mania, or was that right for the Friday Night SmackDown after Mania, Gerard?
So I'm going to go with what some people might consider an unpopular opinion, and I'm going to say yes, it belonged on SmackDown. And here's my why. Because Mania already is a 2-day situation. And I know for a lot of us, the idea of having this kind of special, cool gimmick match at a Mania is a thing. You know, we remember last year, the Street Profits being involved in that hardcore match or something like that happened. And, you know, you had Snoop Dogg on commentary, like you had all these things. I think one of the real challenges that happens is we can get so focused on Mania that we forget, unlike other sports, this thing's going to continue following Mania.
Right.
You know, the Raw after Mania is massive. The SmackDown after Mania, I think, is gaining importance. People have placed more opinion on the SmackDown before Mania. So here, they needed something to pull the people in and cause them to watch. This triple threat match, first of all, they did it with no commercials, which my initial concern was going to be there are going to be commercials. Commercials during a TLC match just is not a thing. So you do this commercial free, and they have the proverbial chip on their shoulders, feeling like everybody talking about it should have been at Mania, et cetera, et cetera. You get to be the main event of a SmackDown, and it's going to run at least a solid 30 minutes. You're not getting a 30-minute match at WrestleMania. That's the truth. You're just not. And what's going to happen is that TLC match was going to get overshadowed by anything that we saw. We've been talking about the triple threat match for the women, the triple threat match for the men, all that happened with Cena and Cody and whatever else. It was going to not get the shine it's getting right now. On a night like last Friday night, it ended up being the main event. It's the thing we're all talking about. Look, I don't think the guy with the prosthetic leg was at WrestleMania. Right? So that's a whole moment you get that you were not going to get at Mania. This guy gets famous. It goes viral. All the people are talking because it's on SmackDown and not on the WrestleMania card. I think we have to not diminish these weekly cards that we get, because the truth of it is lots of ratings are attached to that. There's a lot of money attached to the USA deal, to the Netflix deal. So they have to bring us something on a weekly basis that will cause us to tune in. We're all talking about that match because it was so good, and you don't get TLC matches regularly on a SmackDown. So we kind of got what we wanted. Our Black Tag Team Champions killing it in a triple threat TLC match. They did all the things and came out victorious in the main event. And because here's the other thing. It wasn't going to be the main event of WrestleMania.
No way.
It wasn't. So for me, they got the shine. They got the spotlight. Matter of fact, their tag title match, which happened across the seas, that was a main event opportunity for them. So it's another main event on SmackDown for them, which says, wow, are we building SmackDown main events around your tag team champions? That's a win. So to me, I think it was a much bigger win than people realize. I know everybody wants it on Mania, but I think there are a lot of reasons why it being on SmackDown was actually the right move.
Max, tell me why it should have been on Mania.
Gerard is right in a lot of the sentiments he's saying, right? it should have been on Mania because of this, just the sheer effort WWE put into actually building that tag team division on SmackDown.
I agree with that.
You probably could have thrown in 2 more teams and, just had a ladder match or whatever the case is at Mania. I think that's where a lot of people thought they were going to go anyway. So to kind of see it, none of them make Mania, and then we have it after Mania, it felt almost like a slap in the face. Like, fans probably felt like, well, what are they doing? They've invested so much in these guys. Now they're not on Mania. You've recently made the Street Profits champions as well. They're probably one of the most popular tag teams. They're not on Mania. So it's just a bit of like, if WWE are going to make the SmackDown before Mania, SmackDown after Mania, and the same for Raw's important, then at least now we know,
Mm-hmm.
But I think just in that moment where it's like, we didn't know, like, why are you doing this sort of thing? Such a big match. And for me, why I thought this was going to be on Mania, because it's, if I'm correct, 25 years since the original TLC match, or the triangle ladder match, as they called it.
The triangle ladder match, yeah.
Yeah, like 25 years on. These guys in the match, they paid homage to some of the spots we saw in those matches.
Right.
So for sentimental reasons, it would have been nice, However, like you said, they would have not got the time. They would have not got, half of the guy with the prosthetic leg. With those moments probably wouldn't have happened. And even moving the conversation along a bit, you guys must have noticed this. The Montez Ford highlight reel following the match. Like, he got his own highlight reel.
He did.
Which is like, okay, are you dropping hints here, or which it was good to see, sort of thing. So yeah, I think there was a lot of positives that, for all of the performers, that it happened on SmackDown, was given time to breathe, and they absolutely just done anything and everything you could do with a table, ladders, and chairs. But I'm sure even still, those performers would have wanted to be on Mania. Like, that's why you're in the business.
Oh, of course. I completely agree. There's definitely something about it. The level of the match, the performance from everyone involved. As you said, the whole build up and the efforts made in this tag team division for the last, since the start of this year, really. With all the different tag teams that have been involved and great jobs in boosting this tag team division on SmackDown, it would have made sense to reward them with being at Mania. But I'm also, as well, even more so, more about the weekly show, or having a reason to watch the weekly show. If that happened at Mania, that SmackDown probably wouldn't have been memorable, because let's be real, there wasn't a lot on the Friday night SmackDown that made you think, oh, this is the SmackDown after Mania. You know what I mean? And I don't think the TLC match was either, but because it was as entertaining as it was, it still gave us something to talk about. We're talking about it now, some of the moments that happened, all that kind of stuff, the correlation between, being on, 25 years later, a few days off, and all that kind of stuff. For me, that is the main part of it all is having something to watch on the weekly shows, getting excited about the weekly shows, and not just, yes, it's the biggest show of the year, of course, but we still need something to tune into on a Monday and Friday. And I don't know whether, the guys involved may feel completely different. They probably will feel a little upset that it wasn't on Mania. They probably feel like it should have been on Mania more than it is about the weekly show. But they did their best. It's memorable. They got the time. We saw the moments, and it was what it was. And I think I mentioned this last week. If I didn't, I definitely wanted to. When we were talking about the whole single black male, and we talked about the likes of a Montez and a Carmelo, even Angelo Dawkins. But I truly believe that we're in a space where the Street Profits are holding tag team championships, and it's been done in a way in order to build and Montez Ford. I truly feel like this is kind of like the last tag team run, where they are presented as a tag team, and then eventually, whether it's a breakup, whether they just do single stuff but are still friends, we're going to see. I feel like there's a definitive push to push Montez forward. If there isn't, my word, they're missing a trick. They're missing a trick because this guy is as ready as anyone. And we've said it for the last 5 years, literally 5 years, that he has been, and he is. But he's more ready now than he ever has been. And that's quite obvious, especially as you said, with that Montez reel that we saw. Like, that never happened. There were 6 people involved in the match who also did great things, but Montez was the one. Anyway, that's
he came in with that Shawn Michaels-esque
HBK
outfit on, right?
Yeah.
I'm just like, all of these things you're
all
showing
of
us.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Wild stuff, but good to see.
Yeah.
Moving away from WWE NXT, AEW, we saw Mercedes versus Athena. We had our opinions about it, who should have won, what happens from here, who benefits, all that kind of stuff. Gerard, do you feel, so we know that Mercedes won the match, a phenomenal match between the two. Do you feel as though the match had the right outcome and the right person in terms of, how we present these ladies, where they're at in their positions as champions, all the rest of it? Do you feel as though the right person won?
As I think about that, I think about really trying to be objective about this. And I say that because I've wanted Athena to be recognized as she should be. The things that she's done in Ring of Honor, still their longest reigning world champion ever. And I just don't like that when she's brought onto AEW television, it's to be handed a loss. Like, I don't like that. With that said, it's right now hard to argue the greatness of Mercedes Moné. This is honestly the Mercedes Moné she's always talked about and that we believed could possibly happen. And now that we've gotten her injury free, she has really been delivering. That match was incredible. It's hard to find a bad Mercedes match. And so should Mercedes Moné be the person potentially fighting for the world title against Toni Storm in a stadium where you're trying to get 50,000 people? You're not going to get a bigger women's match than that. I mean, like, that's the reality of it. No shade to any other woman in the AEW universe, but the biggest women there are Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné. Let's just lock in and go with that. So did the right person win? Yes. I think they gave us the match under the wrong circumstances. I don't think it should have been part of this tournament. Should Athena be considered to battle Toni Storm? Sure, by virtue of the fact that she's longest reigning, world champion over in Ring of Honor. In terms of how the AEW fans would watch, they likely don't even know this. So all of that said, and I mean, that's just because it's all behind the pay window, the paywall of Ring of Honor. So with that said, yes, Mercedes was the right person to win this. If it's not her and Toni Storm for the world title at All In, what are we doing?
I completely agree with, the bigger match, cannot be argued. Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné is, you're not going to get more bums on seats than with any two other women in AEW right now. It's just not going to happen. But my question to you, Mex, is this. With Mercedes holding 4 belts, one of them being, AEW TBS, she's got New Japan Strong, Rev Pro, and then the other one, I can't remember what it is, but 4 belts, challenging Toni Storm, the AEW Women's Champion. We expect that to happen at All In. Does Mercedes walk away with 5 belts?
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
This has been our show. Thank you so much.
Why do you say that?
Honestly, I think it's part of the gimmick. She is the highest paid woman, as she says in the business. So it's like, why wouldn't you do it? It gives everyone something to talk about. It moves it on from Toni Storm, who has been great. Toni Storm's picked it back up again, and that has to end. And then we'll go through the cycle of Mercedes giving back and, dropping those titles and stuff like that. But I think it's the big one now. It's like she's got 4 already. What would prevent her from adding a 5th? She'll have a blockbuster of a match against Jamie Hayter in the final of the tournament. She'll move on to the champion and she'll beat Toni Storm. And she's on what the kids say, a generational run right now. She absolutely is. This is the defining run when we start saying, right, how good was Mercedes Moné? This is what we're going to talk about. Because before, all we had was 4 matches across Stardom and New Japan to talk about Mercedes Moné as a character.
Right.
It took her a while to find her feet in AEW. She's found her feet and she's doing some great stuff. A lot of it not really character stuff, but I guess this isn't the place for character stuff. She's just literally, I've said maybe about a month or 2 ago, it literally feels like she's just being called in, a bit like a Brock Lesnar. Come in, have this one-off match. She's on her own island. She doesn't do stuff in the ring too often. She's backstage with Renee Paquette. She's like just on her own island, being brought in as like a mercenary by AEW. Come and earn some money, wrestle some women, and collect these belts. So yeah, I think that's what happens. I think that's the plan. Like you said, it is the biggest match they could do in that women's division for their women's title. And that's what decides it, sort of thing. When you put in on that kind of crowd, where her former Sasha Banks fans will be watching, you put the belt on her. Like that's how it goes, sort of thing. And then, like I say, she can go on a tour later in the year of dropping the others, giving back, etc., etc.
For sure. And it's this whole thing, like you said. She's the highest paid female wrestler that's ever. She's gone undefeated since her debut, all this kind of thing. Like you said, she's won belts, defended against some of the best around the world, not just in AEW, all this kind of thing. And it kind of just feels like it's a shoo-in, which kind of sounds bad for the effort, because of the efforts that Toni Storm has been putting in and the great character work and the matches and all the things that she's been doing and had. But when you kind of add everything up, it just makes a lot more sense for Mercedes to come away with the win. But then the question is, and I guess it's been a question for like about a year now, what do we do with Athena?
I would like, for me, I thought this Texas show was going to be a big kind of coming out party for Athena, sort of thing. Like, I thought you give her the opportunity to wrestle Mercedes there and win the TBS title. And yeah, she does it in Texas, and then maybe she can go on. But I thought by now she would have dropped the Ring of Honor women's title. Does it sound lame if I say she defends the Ring of Honor women's title on the show? I say defends, she might lose it, but she has a Ring of Honor women's title match on the show. Yeah. That's what it looks like right now. It doesn't look like she may be involved in anything else unless they make Mercedes pull double duty because she's got 2 belts. And she loses the TBS earlier in the night, and then beats Toni Storm later on. Maybe.
That was actually something I thought would probably happen during the Owen. Athena beating Mercedes at some point and winning the TBS championship. And then later down the line, probably obviously it wouldn't have been all in if she was knocked out of the tournament, but Mercedes then capturing the AEW Women's Championship. But yeah, it's a bit of we're still in this rock and hard place when it comes to Athena. I think the only other thing that we could do to make it a big thing is to have someone that is an AEW female star challenge for the ROH championship. I can't think of many that make it a kind of a big match. Maybe Statlander, a Willow Nightingale, one of those two. Megan Bain is kind of up there, or kind of coming up. And then, of course, Jamie Hayter as well. So there actually are a few that you could use. But, yeah, I think a loss would have to happen at All In if it does. But then you've got, what is it? Would it be Death Before Dishonor that happens before All In as well?
Yeah.
So,
and then there's a Supercard of Honor that's like, I think, what, this week or next week?
Yeah. Supercard of Honor is happening as well. But yeah, I mean, there's still a hell of a lot of time for a lot of things to turn around, a lot of things to change. It kind of feels weird to me that the tournament, the Owen tournament final, is in like 4 weeks.
Right.
Why is it so far? That's wild. I don't know what they do in between that time, but that's so far away.
This is the booking problems they tend to give themselves. Like in the past, we've talked about that gap between World's End and Revolution at the beginning of the year. Last year, we saw same thing. Mariah May won the Owen, and it's like, all right, we know that Mariah May is going to face Toni Storm, her mentor, the person she idolizes, etc., etc. Mariah May even took it one step further and turned on the night she won it.
Right.
And then you still have 8 weeks of story to tell, and that's where the story was like,
it started fading.
Yeah, it's fighting for its life because you've done things a bit too early, sort of thing, and they went and done the same thing again. So I don't know. We'll see. But saying obviously what I said earlier around Mercedes not doing a lot of character stuff, 8 weeks of her engaging in Toni Storm has got to be.
That could be interesting. It has to be.
It has got to be epic. So Toni, and from what we've seen over the last year or so, we already know Toni Storm's going to play her part. Now Mercedes Moné has to, in a sense, shut the critics up, because I think this is part of the reason they're not overexposing her, because there's a lot of being said about her WWE isms and it's kind of coming through into AEW. So yeah, she has to kind of bring it, because we already know there's evidence that Toni Storm will be, fantastic in that build.
Speaking of women in championships, ROH, AEW. ROH last week decided to reveal another new women's championship, which is the Women's Pure Championship. Interestingly enough, a match that is happening in the first round of the tournament is probably a match that we would expect to maybe be the tournament final, which is Queen Aminata against Serena Deeb. They've been going to and fro for a couple of weeks, months now. And as I said, they face each other in this tournament. My first thought when I saw this kind of thing revealed and whatnot is brilliant. A pure rules matches for the women, something new for them to do, and all the rest of it. The downside for me is there are two things here. We had this whole issue with Athena and the Women's World Championship and her not being recognized effectively, or all that kind of stuff. Then you look at the relatively new, probably been a year, probably just over a year now, that they introduced the Women's Television Championship. As far as I know and concerned, Red Velvet still had it, probably had about four defenses the whole time that she's had it. Again, another title that's kind of been, I don't know, maybe misused, maybe pushed to one side, underutilized, things of that nature. We're now bringing in a third women's championship that, again, is arguably lower tier to the other two. Why are we doing this when the first two are not being showcased enough? Gerard, what are your thoughts on the new ROH Pure Championship?
My thoughts are similar. I think the concept of it is great. Again, pure matches offer something different. Kind of reminds me of what the Heritage Cup used to do in NXT, right? It's just a presentation that's something different that makes you think differently when you're watching the sport. It makes the wrestlers respond differently, gives you another reason to be connected. I think that is fantastic. This reminds me of the old adage, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, is there sound? Of course there's sound, but who's there to authenticate it? And here's the thing. I think it's great that we have a Women's Pure Championship coming in Ring of Honor. I think it's great that they're going to have a tournament for it. But if there's nobody there to see it, right? If Ring of Honor is still being treated like, oh, we'll record this, on the back end or the front end of some AEW television, and we'll just splice it all together, and then we'll have a pay-per-view, like, what are we doing? And I want to be clear, right? Like, I have friends who work over in Ring of Honor. I love the fact that people have jobs and people have opportunities and things like that. My concern is that should be showcased. So my God, if you got to put it on Triller or, carve out another hour and put it on Max, like, put it somewhere where people have a reason to watch. This whole idea that you're paying $9.99 to just get access to their weekly television program that doesn't have a centralized location where it's taping. If you watch one of the weekly programs, the stories aren't moving at the same speed that you get if you're watching on cable for AEW. So logistically and logically, it doesn't make sense for the wrestling consumer, who you're already asking in the AEW universe to pay more for a pay-per-view than anybody else, right? They're going to have to pay $50 for a pay-per-view. And now you want to have a pay-per-view every month. Now you want them to spend $10 a month on a product that you don't even produce, that you don't even push or promote properly. So adding another championship, I think, is not the wisest move logistically, unless we're going to create a scenario where people can actually access this level of television without having to go behind a pay window. Because let's just think about it in the wrestling economy. You're telling me I can pay $9.99 a month, get TNA Plus or Ring of Honor, right? TNA, I can watch their weekly program, which is a 2-hour program, sometimes airs live. I can sometimes get pay-per-views connected with that. All good, right? Oh, and TNA has a partnership with WWE. So I know the kind of stars I'm going to get. When I'm watching Ring of Honor, I'm going to get matches that, for the most part, have enhancement talent, is not being treated the same. Let's do one better. So I can pay $9.99 a month and get Ring of Honor's Honor Club, or I can pay $5-6 a month and get Peacock and get the WWE and all that's connected to it, right? Or if I'm doing the whole Netflix situation internationally, I'm going to get everything WWE. Plus, in the wrestling economy, it's not making sense. So they need to make it make sense so that because other than that, you're just spending a lot of money on a championship, a lot of money on all, and you're not getting a return on it. And I'm concerned about that.
Yeah. Max, do you feel as though, I think we generally got excited about the women's television championship match, or championship in general, because we were seeing the likes of a Red Velvet, Queen Aminata, Billy Starks, and a few others kind of coming up and whatnot, making a bit of a name for themselves, and that being something that they could use to kind of establish some of these ladies. They haven't really done that. Yes, it's nice that Red Velvet has held it for as long as she had, but the likes of a Queen Aminata, she's been kind of thrust in and out of different spaces, and there's no, give her that title, boom, let's go. Now we're having this pure championship. Are we trying to find more women? Are there enough women in ROH for them to have this and utilize it properly?
This goes back to what we've always said of ROH not knowing what it actually is. Like, is this AEW Dark in disguise? Is this AEW Elevation in disguise, whatever they used to call that show? Because for the sheer fact that Tony Khan bought that Ring of Honor name, I thought, if not for anything, this man is going to herald and hold up in high regard the heritage of the Ring of Honor name. And my God, he's done anything but do that. He just used it as, unfortunately, like Gerard said, I'm grateful enough to have friends, people I can call friends, and people have become civil with working there and getting a paycheck. But it's nothing but a dumping ground. So all you're doing now is adding more trinkets for people to compete with. That, how is it helping their profile? Why is Red Velvet still there? Like, this is someone that's been on Darks and early AEW Dynamite. Why is she still there? So is this developmental like people have said it is? Like, I don't know. I don't know what this is. So I put very little stock into all of these titles there. And even Athena, like we're all counting down when she reached it and became the longest reigning Ring of Honor champion of all time. Brilliant accolade. But it's like now where the clock is still ticking and it's like, what's being done? Like, is she struggling to hold on to the title? There's not really any high level story with her high level accolade that she's achieved. Like, I don't want to sound rude, but I don't care about the women's pure championship. Like, I think, like you said, the final should probably be Deeb and Aminata because of the story they've been telling. Right, it's a first round match, so okay. Aminata should surely win this. If she gets past the Professor, the Master, then she should be, carry the championship. But then what will it mean? So it's great for the women. I think all round women's wrestling is such a good place these days. I've got my own gripes, and this isn't, before anyone says this is AEW Ring of Honor exclusive, I've got a rant that I'm loading up about how the US title and IC title is being treated right now with the WWE for the women. But yeah, this, we've got a TBS, we've got this, that, and the other. We've got a Ring of Honor Women's Championship. We've got the TV Championship. Now we've got a pure one. It's just more trinkets right now. Like, I can't even call it championships. They're trinkets and just little things to have, for a division that we're not developing and growing and pushing them on to the next stage.
I mean, I even look at what they've done or haven't done with Lee Moriarty and the Men's Pure Championship as well. So much more could have been done. So much more could have been said. But again, I think the real problem is this whole AEW paywall, ROH paywall situation. And you said Mex, the whole thing of them not knowing what the brand really is, represents, and what it's supposed to be for. And it just continues to be problem after problem. And then you want to add a problem by adding another championship when you don't even know what you're doing with the other two. Or basically every other championship in ROH, to be honest. Every single one. All the men's, all the women's ones, like, what are we doing? Bandito beats Chris Jericho, but then what?
Ain't seen him since.
You know what I mean? Dustin Rhodes is still holding the tag team and trios championships. Why?
Remember when Eddie Kingston was the Ring of Honor champion and never appeared on Ring of Honor?
I remember that.
Exactly. Chris Jericho basically did the same thing. Claudio basically did the same thing, apart from on the pay-per-views. Similar type of situation.
Mark Briscoe done that completely.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Every single one of them. And we talked in length on what happened when Gates of Agony were trios champions, and when they would appear on AEW, always lose. It's the most confusing thing in wrestling for me. I don't understand it. I don't get why it's happening. I mean, we're seeing the NXT Women's Champion appear on Raw winning matches. That hasn't happened for Athena yet.
Look at that.
Sure hasn't.
My word.
It's literally called Ring of Honor. Like, where is the honor? You're not even honoring the promotion and the heritage of the promotion. Like, there is no AEW without Ring of Honor.
Ring of Honor, literally.
Like, they used Ring of Honor, their talent, their facilities and stuff like that to get off their first independent show before Tony Khan even said, okay, this AEW thing could work. Like, you're not even, and I thought you're putting this in the hands of at least someone that understands that. That was my one happy point about them winning that particular bidding war. And there is no honor. There is none.
Dusty said it best. There is no honor among them. There is no honor.
None.
Frightening to me, man. It's frightening.
It is. It's worrying, man. It's worrying in a big way because, as I said, I got excited when we had
make it.
but that's where we are. The last thing I want to talk about real quickly, we've seen this whole thing with Swerve, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega. We've seen the Death Riders involved. We've seen Hangman Adam Page involved. But one thing that we've seen kind of come together a little bit more is Swerve and Omega. We saw, I think it was the past week on Collision. Swerve was confronted by the Young Bucks. They threw Blake Christian at him. He managed to beat him in an impromptu match. Of course, then Bucks were not happy, attacked Swerve. Kenny Omega comes to his rescue, scare off the Bucks. They run away. And then the two men, Swerve and Omega, show a sign of camaraderie. Mex, how do you feel about this whole thing, including as well, let me not forget, the Ups beating the Death Riders for the Trios Championships. And now you've got Samoa Joe challenging Moxley for the world title. So, I asked Gerard this question a few weeks back. We've got Swerve, Hangman. Will Ospreay has laid claim to wanting to win the championship by All In or at All In. Samoa Joe now. We had Jay White. Darby Allin's still kind of in this conversation. Cope was about. Christian had the contract. Orange Cassidy was there. How many people are going to face Jon Moxley and lay claim to being and want to be the number one contender before we see Moxley lose? Is this confusion? Is this ACW or Confusion Wrestling, or is it AEW? What's going on?
Wow.
I don't know. Like, I think the Swerve and Kenny Omega thing is just a good kind of fan piece to keep people happy. You know, two beloved guys that will probably go up against the Young Bucks at Double or Nothing or something like that. And I think it ends there. Like, I don't even know what Swerve is going to be doing come All In July. I can't really tell. Samoa Joe's not going to beat Moxley. Moxley will walk into All In as champion. Are we just keeping that spot warm for Darby Allin, which I guess was the plan? And of course, we got the Owen stuff, so it could be it's looking like Ospreay or Hangman, right? And I think Ospreay could be someone that they give a big win to at All In, potentially. They've got Forbidden Door in London later on, a month later. So, he can come to London as the AEW World Champion. But yeah, like, it's a very convoluted scene, like you're saying, 100%. Once you have previous pretenders that have went after it, and Samoa Joe coming up, and an Owen tournament still to decide the next one. It's a lot. It's a lot that's happening. But yeah, for All In, for Swerve, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if they just, give us another installment of Swerve versus Hangman. Although their dynamics of their relationship has slightly changed at this point. I have no idea where they're going to go with that one.
I'm not sure, but is there like a blood and guts in between all of this before All In? Is there any kind of, because I'm seeing
if they do it, then
I'm seeing Hangman and Swerve having to work together in some sort of way. I don't think it's directly as a tag team, but maybe in a 4 or 5 man team situation, 8-man, 10-man tag type of situation. And I think for me, that's the only thing that's probably penned on paper already for Swerve. I don't know what happens after that. He had his chance at Dynasty. No one was really expecting him to beat Moxley. There was a slim chance, possibility. I'm sure if it happened, no one would have really complained necessarily, but I don't think anyone was expecting it. But from then on, it's nice to have Swerve and Omega. Again, it kind of shows us that they're keeping Swerve in high regard, high on the card and all that kind of stuff, high in importance. But I think we're still kind of working this whole Swerve and Hangman situation, rivalry, or story, if you want to go there, if we're expecting to kind of see some kind of, them working together in a very weird way, but still interesting. Which again, long-term storytelling, all that kind of stuff, going down as a long time, great rivalry, in the eyes of like, a Cena and Orton, as we've kind of got at the moment in WWE. It could go down in history like that at some point. But I don't know what Swerve does after that, what his whole thing is. But if the plan, and I expect this to be the thing, if the plan is for Ospreay to beat Moxley, I think we've then got a strong belief that Swerve could be a strong contender for him. Could possibly win, depending on how long after Ospreay wins it, and all that stuff. But yeah, I think this is so funny, but I think it's very similar to what Gerard was saying last week about cycles, and it's just funny that Swerve is now in that same cycle of being a single black wrestler, or a singles wrestler, black singles wrestler, who is now on his cycle, not holding the championship, not necessarily challenging for a championship, but he has to kind of wait his turn again in order to get back, really to be a real contender, a very believable and wanted champion, I guess, in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the AEW championship. So yeah, it should be interesting indeed. Gosh, I think that's everything for today. We've gone here, there, and everywhere, and we can end the show on this note. Mex, tell us where the people can find you and everything else that you're doing in the space of pro wrestling.
Yeah, WrestleManiac UK on all social media platforms. You can also find me on WWE GP for all things WWE, and then Rest Things at Rest Things, just for all other kind of pro wrestling noise, barbershop noise.
Barbershop noise, I love that. Gerard, where can the people find you?
For sure. You can find me at Bonafide across all of the social spaces. You can check out my work with Ashe Wrestling at AsheWrestling.com. Of course, we just came back from Vegas for our big Ashe Vegas show during Mania Week. That is available along with all of our other shows at AsheWrestling.com. You can also check out the first season of Ashe Wrestling TV at the Ashe Wrestling YouTube channel, which is really, really exciting stuff. All Caribbean Wrestling, you can check out what we're doing every Saturday for Saturday Night Vibe. That's on Tempo Networks. You can also check that out on the All Caribbean mobile app. And you can check that out on Triller TV as well. So check that out. You can check out my work with the Nightmare Factory on the Nightmare Factory's YouTube channel. Student Showcase 17 is there, so you can check that out. And then all of my work with Southern Honor Wrestling is over at IWTV. We've got another big show coming up next week. So again, all of those places, of course, here and at Bonafide on the socials.
Phenomenal stuff. And of course, you can find me at Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Every now and again, BWA Dazzle on X. But of course, you can catch all three of us every Tuesday on the show WrstlXtra, 6 o'clock UK time. Work it out wherever else you live. It's too much headache for me. But we will see you again next time. Thank you for joining us. See you again next time, guys. Take care.